Thank you for joining us today with the webinar of electronic production management in cannabis industry, powered by EBA. Thank you very much for your time and thank you very much for your interest. Today we have a panel of speakers to share with you how EBA is being used in cannabis industry, and we'll show you some real-time examples, and we'll also learn about cannabis industry in general. Today I have Nathan Berman with us. He's from Panacea Life Sciences. He's a production specialist at Panacea Life Sciences. We have Joel Halverson with us. He's from Quintel Management Consulting Company. He's a director at Quintel. And we have Sam Wett with us. He's pre-sales software engineer at Bimser International. And I am Kevin Devecioglu. I'm the managing director of Bimser International. Today, together, we'll be presenting you how you can manage electronically production management operations in cannabis industry. And before we start with Panacea Life Sciences and talk about cannabis industry in general, I like to share some information with you with regards to Bimser International, who we are and what we do. I have a very brief presentation that I am going to be sharing with you, and then I'll pass the microphone to Nate, and we'll learn about cannabis industry and how Panacea Life Sciences is managing production operations in cannabis industry with the help of ERP Cannabis, powered by EBA. As Bimser International, we are an enterprise software maker since 1998. We are based in New York. In essence, we help companies simplify their processes, and we help organizations digitally transform themselves. That's what we do, and that is how we design our products. We are a group of companies. Our global headquarters is in Istanbul metro area. We have another company in Europe called Bimser Europe for our European operations. And us, Bimser International, we are based in New York. So as a group, we are about 160 people. We are a growing organization. We work day and night to improve our products and help organizations transform themselves digitally and simplify their processes. Bimser is a certified SAP vendor, a Microsoft Gold partner, and Acumatica Cloud ERP software vendor. Bimser is certified by ISO. Bimser has ISO 9001 certification, ISO 27001 certification, and it has a certification called Ping Verify for the solution of EBA ITSM ITOM solution. So since 1998, as Bimser International, we have been very focused. We just developed these 4 products. We have EBA. EBA is our workflow and document management platform. It is also called Enterprise Content Management Platform and Business Process Automation Platform as well. And we'll talk more about it today. And not only theoretically, also practically, we'll also show you examples of how EBA can be actually helpful for your business, especially in cannabis industry. We have BEAM. BEAM is an enterprise-level asset maintenance and energy management software. It also has plant maintenance capabilities in it. QDMS is a quality, risk, and compliance management software. It helps companies manage their quality operations. Also, it has compliance functionalities for companies to comply with ISO, AS9100, BRC, SQF, and many other quality and management standards. And finally, we have Ensemble. Ensemble is a business process management tool. Here you can see how we position our products. Ensemble is more of a managerial tool with performance management and with balanced scorecard capabilities. EBA with the enterprise content management, BEAM with asset management, and QDMS with quality management. They automate processes. All of our products, they can work standalone. They can be linked to each other, or they can be integrated with any ERP, any CRM platform. Our products work on cloud, they work on-premise servers, and we have mobile apps available. And we keep improving our products to make it easier and easier for our customers to use it. And these figures are by the end of last year, so these figures are actually growing. As you can see, since we have been active in enterprise software market since 1998, we have many customers and references available. Speaking of references, here you can see some of our reputable references, starting with Panacea Life Sciences. Today we'll be learning more about Panacea. In addition to Panacea, we have United Nations as one of our references. United Nations is using EBA for refugee tracking and refugee documentation tracking. We have ArcLight movie theaters based in California. They use EBA for purchasing management operations in association with their ERP system. We have Bridgestone in tire and manufacturing industry as a reference for EBA enterprise content management platform. We have AstraZeneca as a reference in pharmaceutical industry. We have Societe Generale in banking and finance. 3M is using EBA in 17 different countries. Ford and Renault Nissan Alliance also some of our references available both in US and globally. So in a nutshell, that's who we are and what we do. And what I like to do is that I like to hand the microphone to Nathan Berman to learn more about Panacea, Panacea Life Sciences. Also, we love to learn about cannabis industry as well. As we know, it's a growing industry and it's emerging, and many developments are happening on daily basis, so we can learn about the industry. Furthermore, we love to learn how EBA and EBA-based ERP cannabis solution is helping Panacea Life Sciences become more efficient. So I like to leave it to Nate. And Nathan, thank you very much for your time and thank you for joining us. And I'd like to thank Panacea Life Sciences for choosing ERP Cannabis powered by EBA. Please continue from here. Thank you very much.
We really strive to do is create basically a medical grade product with a really medical and scientific focus product space. It's really unique and challenging as well, because since it is such a new industry, there is not a lot of regulation and not a lot of customer knowledge. And from a production standpoint, this lack of knowledge and regulation is difficult because competitors and other companies are not really at the behest of the FDA or any other sort of organization to have quality standards in terms of what they say is in their product and quality standards of the materials that are used. So basically, a lot of our competitors and other people in the industry are using hemp products that are grown in ways that use heavy metals and pesticides and really things that a lot of people would not want in their body. But there's really no recourse for them. And then from another perspective, what makes it difficult is that these products are produced in, kind of environments that aren't necessarily what people would expect from ingestible products. And then from a final end consumer standpoint, there is no real guideline. There's no real regulation in terms of what people put on their label. So a lot of people can put really whatever concentration, whatever dosage they want without any recourse. And it really hurts the consumer because they might be taking a product that says it has 100 milligram concentration and it might really have 10. And so ultimately, for a company like ours that strives to put the customer first and make sure that all of the products we source and produce are grown without any harmful additives or harmful chemicals used in the growing process. But really, I think in terms of taking a long view of everything, this is really the proper approach. And from an ethical standpoint, it's also the proper approach, because as this type of medicine treatment becomes a lot more commonplace and people become a lot more knowledgeable about everything, having a product that can really stand on its own in terms of medical grade and a basically healthy product is really important. And we have basically, the interesting thing about kind of CBD is it has both a kind of recreational focus where people might say, oh, this makes me feel better. And that's a pretty easy, there's nothing too scientific about that. But as we can see on this slide, there are a lot of things that people are taking that traditional medicine typically would treat these needs and diseases. But for a lot of people, I guess, and from a personal standpoint, prescription medication is great in the sense that it can heal, ailments and stuff, but it also creates a lot of other effects, whether they're harmful side effects or dependencies. One thing that's great about a product like CBD is that people don't have these kind of dependencies, addictions, or side effects. For the most part, it seemed to be pretty much side effect free, dependency free. And so for a lot of people, they can treat current disorders or other things with in a much more natural way without having to put basically medicine that's cooked up in a lab for them. Would you like me kind of to keep going in terms of our, I guess, operational process?
Yeah, that'd be great if that's okay for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's great for us is that, as I mentioned, there's not really a regulatory body, but what we are trying to do is trying to be industry leaders and kind of at the forefront of the, as CBD or kind of nutraceuticals, whatever you might call it, become more commonplace, is to help set those precedents and help develop those types of regulations that ultimately are going to be requirements for anybody. So we recently moved into a new facility where it used to be a building for the EPA, and so it's great because the space we were working in, it made the kind of growth of the company and the expansion we're doing made it very difficult for us to adhere to pharmaceutical standards, or what they call GMP standards, and that's really what we strived for. So we made a decision to invest in a building that had a lot more infrastructure already built into it. So now if you would see the facility, it's amazing because there's a lot more clean rooms and a lot more space for the actual manufacturing to occur, and it only helps position us in a better place and within the industry as kind of hopefully trendsetters. If you want to be a pharmaceutical type product, these are the kind of baseline things you have to do. And so that's kind of just like, I guess, a broad overview of what we do. When I talk about the actual specifics, we are vertically integrated, and like I said, that poses a lot of different kind of business structures, but ultimately it also gives us economies of scale when it comes to creating these kind of pharmaceutical practices. So everything that occurs at the warehouse or everything that you see in the product occurs at the warehouse, with the exception of the hemp growing itself. But for all the hemp that we purchase, we source it from local organic sources, and those are all pretty heavily tested, like I said, for pesticides and heavy metals. And if we don't find a product that is organically grown without any of these additives, then we'll just reject it. But we've been fortunate to find some good partners who share the same kind of vision for the future and this product with us. And aside from that, once the hemp is sent from the farm or wherever it is to our warehouse, I would probably break it down into a kind of scientific chemistry sort of sense, and then a manufacturing sense, and then a retail sense. So we'll take the hemp, which is in just its raw form, and we'll pluck it and grind it down, and then extract the oil within that. And then once we have this kind of crude oil, that kind of sets the foundation for the products we actually make. So there's basically two different forms of material that we use. The first one is called distillate, and it's a purified version of the crude oil we extract. So when we take the raw hemp, we remove the oil and are left with kind of a crude oil, almost like a dark brownish kind of oil. And we have a proprietary process that kind of, in sort of a column similar to what you'd see on the left there. Basically, we run all the oil through, and it parses all the fats and sugars and esters and all of these kind of things that we try and remove from the product. And basically, it goes through these columns that the filtration on it's like 1 micron, or these really really fine particles. So and what's kind of great is all the equipment you see here on this slide is basically we're working with old facility, and we have brought all that equipment to our new facility. However, we made another significant investment in equipment, so that not only will we be able to produce in a more efficient fashion, but in just a lot higher quantity volume. So back to what I was saying, the crude oil gets through filtration process or a distillation process gets turned into what's called distillate, which is more, if you go from a dark brown of our crude oil to it turns into more of like a honey-like color. And that is a product we use in a lot of our soft gel products. So primarily what we make are soft gel products, lotions and salves, and tinctures, as well as tablets. But the tablets we occasionally outsource. But from an oil perspective, the distillate goes into a lot of our oil and or into a lot of our soft gels. And the soft gels are important for us because we do tinctures, which is more just to meet the market demand. But soft gels, I think, are really our main focus because it holds truest to our medical focus because it allows for consistent dosing. Whereas a tincture, which is essentially a dropper in a bottle, depending on how the formulation is homogenized or depending on how big the dropper full you take, it's just a little bit harder to get consistent dosing. And for soft gels, it's very easy. You take the soft gel, you swallow it, and then we also add kind of proprietary stuff that increases the bioavailability of our products in the body. And so we use a distillate primarily in those soft gels, and the distillate is, like I said, the first kind of output from crude oil, and it still has a very small amount of THC, still less than 0.3%, which is basically the federal guideline of what is classified as a hemp-derived product versus a like marijuana or THC derived product. And so, I mean, throughout the entire process, we're constantly testing material, from when we get into the farm to when we extract it to when we formulate it into our products and so on and so forth. The second type of kind of material that we create from the crude oil is called isolate. And so if you think of it in stages, the first stage is extracting the crude oil. The second stage is refining it into this honey color. And then the final, which still contains some THC particles. And then the final stage is creating the isolate, in which we further refine the distillate and remove we strip it of all THC and a lot of the fats and everything else that it has. So what you're left with when you make distillate is more of a powdery substance as opposed to like an oily substance with distillate. And isolate is a very popular product, especially I think among kind of conditions within children, whether we're talking about epilepsy or just other, kind of issues within children, especially because, it doesn't contain that THC product. And in terms of like, I guess, regulation, we do stay with our distillate, we stay within that federal guideline, but isolate it's a much cleaner, this has 0% THC. So we use the isolate to make soft gels as well. Like I said, because it's a more powdery substance, it doesn't really, it's not soluble in a soft gel like distillate is, but we have a kind of proprietary process where we take our THC and reformulate it into like an oil soluble formulation, which we can then subsequently use to make soft gels. So we basically have, from a soft gel perspective, we have kind of parallel products that are, distillate products, and then the same exact kind of potency and strength in a THC-free product or isolate-derived product. And for a lot of people, it's really just a personal preference. Isolate, like I said, has more beneficial impact when we're talking about children's medication or something you might give to somebody who's more of an adolescent, whereas the distillate product has what they call the full spectrum of the cannabinoids. And so I personally think that it provides a little more benefit just because each cannabinoid has basically its own medical property. And with isolate, you really just have this one cannabinoid profile, whereas the distillate, you have all these different cannabinoids. They have all these ones: CBDA, CBDN, CBDG, And, each one has kind of its own benefit, and that's kind of what you get, the distillate as opposed to isolate. Once we've extracted, whether it be isolate or distillate, we use that oil or powder as the kind of primary source for our soft gel products or our tablet products or our lotion products. And so we have the manufacturing from the extraction side, and then in terms of an actual packaging and production side, we have that's kind of the next step we do. So we start from taking the hemp, we extract the products, we formulate the products, and then we package and bottle them as well. So we have a pretty heavy duty soft gel machine and bottling machine. And so we're able to basically take it from the plant you see to the bottle you see on the shelf. And for the consumer, it's great because there is no confusion about, well, what are the quality standards of the place where it was extracted? What are the quality standards of the place where it was formulated or produced or bottled or anything? The expectation we hold is very high, and the consumer, in the end, is the one who benefits the most from all of this. And then, once the goods are finished, we have a process of, either getting them placed in retail spaces, or we have a website where we sell the products as well. And like I said, since there's this, federal legal definition of what is considered a hemp product, and from our perspective, it's really beneficial because we're able to sell in other states. We're able to, customers can pay using credit card, that sort of thing. So I think if you're a customer, it's great from the standpoint of where everything's coming from, and the standards that everything is produced with. And for us, from a business side, it creates definitely a very complex business structure, but from an economy of scale and meeting the changes in a rapidly developing and changing industry, it's ultimately going to be very beneficial.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you very much. It's been actually it's been great insight. It's good to learn it from you, someone from the industry, and it's also good to hear that ERP Cannabis powered by IBA has been very helpful in terms of your for production operations and increasing the productivity. That's actually interesting. When I was getting ready for the webinar, I had a chance to actually see the Time magazine yesterday, and they had a special edition just for the cannabis industry that actually this month. So I had a chance to get a copy of it, and it actually starts with the history of cannabis. That was very interesting. I didn't know actually, like 10,000 BC, the first time actually cannabis was actually cannabis grows in the areas of Mongolia. That was actually very interesting to learn. And 2,700 years ago, actually it was seen in China. That was also very interesting. And in United States, as they've been talking about since 1800s, that's been around. So it's been very also interesting to learn about. And there are different articles that talks about how cannabis can be helpful for anxiety, for to cure cancer perhaps, or autism. So there are many things that we can, I think, learn about it. That's very interesting. And just like you mentioned earlier, there is also the legal part of things. So in some states that's legal, in some states that's legal for recreationally, some states they allow it for medically, some states they do not allow at all. Federal, that's a different story. So it's actually it's an evolving industry from the legal point of view, from my understanding. But nevertheless, when we look at the industry from what we read and what we learn, it's a more than $1 billion industry, and that's growing, and that's very exciting. And as Bimser International, we are happy to partner with Quintel, partner with you to help the industry grow and help the industry become more and more productive. We are We are very happy about it. And again, thank you very much for the insights. Please stay with us because we have a Q&A session, and I'm sure we're going to have some questions. Maybe you may want to respond and address.
Yeah, and one last thing I'd just like to say is, I guess, as we talk about kind of a developing industry, I guess that really creates the need for kind of product manufacturing systems or accounting systems or, like any sort of ERP, because especially with cannabis, I mean, what we do is a little bit different, but money was flying out the door. But the market's become a lot more saturated, and as a result, if you are a competitor in the marketplace, it's really important to know what your costs are and just where all the money's going and how it's being tracked. And 5 years ago, it might not have been such a big deal because demand was so high. And if you opened a store or did whatever, the money would just come in. But basically, as the industry gets more saturated and margins start to shrink, it's really important to have basically a hold on, where what am I making money on? Where am I losing money on? What are my costs? What are my margins? How much am I making per product? And in a brand new industry, and an industry with I wouldn't categorize as a very intellectual industry from a lot of people who are involved in it. There is a huge gap to bridge between how businesses operate and how they need to operate in terms of knowing their margins and knowing their efficiencies and that sort of thing.
Great. Yes, definitely. I cannot agree more. Thank you very much for all the information. Much appreciated. And I'd like to turn the microphone to Joel, if that's okay. Joel, can you hear me?
Yep. Thank you, Kevin. So ERP Cannabis is the solution that we'll be talking about today. I am a vice president, director with Quintel Management Consulting, and we have developed the ERP Cannabis solution, which includes EBA, which is the workflow and document management system that Bimser International has developed. So as you can see from this chart, there is a number of different modules that go into the ERP Cannabis solution. It's a complete value chain solution that includes the financials, the front end in terms of retail sales, and also the back end in terms of cultivation and production planning, which is what we're going to focus on today. And then also the human resource element, which again is, of course, something that's critical for understanding the cost structure. And as you're going through your production operations, as Nate was referring to, being able to capture all of your activities and all of your associated costs based upon those activities is critical. And all of that information feeds back to the financial system that is incorporating all of the information from the production planning, as well as all other aspects of business operations and the type of transactions that happen across the organization. So a complete value chain solution. And if we can go to the next slide, we have the areas focused into the grow and production operations, which we'll talk about today. So streamlining the business process and being able to maximize yields and lower costs by understanding the cost structure associated with it. The point of sale and the customer management. So at the retail level, at the dispensary level, at the e-commerce level, whatever point you may be at with your business, being able to capture all of your sales and customer information, of course, is important, and being able to integrate that back into the back end or the back office operations, where finance and accounting, inventory and vendor management, and all of your HR and payroll functionality resides, and then the overall reporting and analytics that goes along with it. So just in terms of Quintel, on the next slide, we are based in Colorado, and we've been implementing ERP solutions since 2002. We started the development of ERP Cannabis about 2 years ago, when we saw the need within the cannabis industry for a complete ERP solution that can provide the type of functionality that we had been implementing in other industries for the past 18 years. So with the common denominator between Quintel and Bimser International is that we are SAP certified partners. And so it just made sense for Quintel to incorporate the functionality of EBA into this solution to be able to make it a more robust and user-friendly solution for an emerging industry such as the cannabis industry. All right. So what I will do is talk about, go into the demo, but just in terms of Panacea, which is an ERP cannabis customer. And you've heard Nate talk about the complexities of the business that Panacea Life Science is in. But when they were first forming the business, they realized that they needed to have an integrated platform to be able to capture everything that happens within the business, even though it's a small business, but a growing business. All of that functionality was needed. So really the challenge was to provide an affordable ERP solution that was user-friendly, but met all the requirements of a growing, new, small company, such as Panacea Life Sciences. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. So this is the ERP Cannabis Launchpad. And from here, depending upon the permissions that have been granted to the user that has been logged in, you can go to different parts of the system. So of course, today we're talking about production. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the production applications, which will take us into the EBA platform, which is where we have all of the different applications that would be applicable or assigned to the production manager in this case. So if we look, for example, we have purchasing related forms, we have production related forms, we have metric integration forms that are required for companies that are making THC-based products. In the case of Panacea Life Sciences, as Nate indicated, their focus is on CBD products that are low in THC, so they're not having to have their products integrated directly with metric. But of course, being able to do that within a user-friendly environment, such as the EBA forms, is critical for the industry to be able to manage everything that happens across the board from a production planning perspective. And then we have some reports that we'll take a look at as well down below, so EBA-based reports. So just as an example, we'll look at creating a recipe. So Nate had talked about the types of products that are created at Panacea Life Sciences. And of course, this particular application, ERP Cannabis, is developed for the manufacturing process across all the different types of areas within the cannabis industry. So the forms are set up to easily select from drop-down menus, and all of this information is being provided from the ERP backend, which in this case happens to be SAP. But just to emphasize the point that these forms or these applications would be available for whether you are connected to an ERP system or not. So the forms can be, for example, integrated with Excel, or they can just be utilized on their own as a way of capturing all of the necessary information associated with production activities, as well as document management type of functionality that's needed for an industry such as this, where tracking and being able to produce documentation regarding products that are being produced is critical. So I'm just going to put in the information that's needed. And I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to focus on a production type of order that's related to the clones. So we have strain A in our demo system. And so if I go ahead and search for the type of product that we want to make, we're going to produce some immature clones, as we call them. So they've been named based upon our standard demo nomenclature, which of course would differ for every type of company. And we're going to create a recipe that is for a target quantity of 100 clones. Okay, so once I have this done, I've gone and selected all of the general information that's needed. At this point, I can then add the specific processes and ingredients that would be needed to be able to create this particular product. So I can select, for example, from the list of activities. We're going to focus on grow activities, and the first one is going to be planting the seeds that would be associated with these clones that we're going to be producing. So I can go ahead and add that. Similarly, I can go ahead and add ingredients. So for example, I may have different raw materials, which we indicate in our system based upon the RM nomenclature, raw materials. And in this case, I'm looking for the seeds associated with strain A. So I'm going to go ahead and add 100 seeds to this recipe as well. And I can continue in this way. So I can add multiple processes. I can add multiple ingredients until I get to the point where I've completely defined the recipe associated with the production of strain A clones. I can also attach documents. So again, the document management feature is necessary, very convenient to be able to add, for example, production specifications to a particular recipe, so that anytime that anyone else needs to look at this information, they can go ahead and call up this particular recipe and look at the associated documents that were attached to it as a way of having standardization across the organization for production purposes. So that's the way that we would create a recipe. Once we've created the recipe, then we can go ahead and continue with creating what we call a process order or a production order. So again, we would go ahead and identify the general information. We can have different entities, different companies, different facilities where these would be produced. We can select the particular product. So in this case, it was the immature clones for strain A, and I'm going to select the recipe. So we just went through and created different recipes, and I can select from the latest version. You can have multiple versions of recipes for different purposes, or as recipes change over time, they can be updated with a target quantity of 100, and again, the unit of measure being selected. So once I've done this, I can go ahead and process this particular document. You can see it comes up and is asking for approval. So whoever would need to approve the creation of a production order, for example, a production manager, overall operations manager, COO of the company, whatever the case might be, there is integrated workflow management within EBA that is very efficient in terms of being able to define specific workflows. And you can see that notifications can be included so that different employees can be notified that there's a new process order that is being started, and then there is an approver, and either the approver can go ahead and process and approve and send it through to the next step, or reject it, in which case it goes back to whoever started the creation of the process order to make relevant changes or whatever the case might be. So I'm going to go ahead and approve this. You can see that there's complete audit trail in terms of who started and who was notified and who completed or approved this particular process order. And then coming back to the actual form, you can see that it's been processed in the backend, in this case, the SAP ERP backend, and we have assigned it process order number 772. So that process order has been created. We have a start date of today. And so those who are responsible then for actually completing the work associated with this particular production order can post all of their activities in the production confirmation form. So again, we have a drop down to be able to select the particular process order that I, as a production worker, am working on today. It's going to come up with a long list, and we'll select the one that we just created, 772. And I am going to then record the time and materials. I do want to note that we also have the ability to attach documents as part of the confirmation form as well. So if there's particular forms that are outside of this system that need to be completed, or specifications or testing results or other things that happen along the way, all of that information can be attached to the form and managed within the document management system as well. So I'm going to go ahead and select add, at which point it'll give me, based upon the recipe, the different types of activities that are needed. So in this case, there's 3 activities. We need to plant the seeds, we need to water the plants, and we need to spray and fertilize. So step 1, I'm going to do the planting today. It took me 5 hours to get that done. And as part of that, I also consumed the seeds that were planted. And if you remember from the recipe, there was 100 seeds and we used all of them. And those are going to be planted. If there was a batch assigned to this particular raw material, we could select it. Can select different locations where these might be raw materials may be coming from, and then go ahead and post that activity, and then additional activities can be added throughout the day, for example, and then finally sending that information through to be able to process that information against process order number 772, which you can see is provided in the processing messages directly on the form. So this, of course, would continue until finally the production is done, at which point we would receive the final product into inventory, and we would continue from there. So when we go back to all of the different forms, for example, the next one would be production receipt. And at this point, we would select the process order, the quantity associated with the actual order, and then what we actually produce. So of course, there may be a variance between what we had planned versus what we actually produced. So the forms provide a very easy way to be able to document and provide input to the ERP system. In this case, like I said, these forms may be used for tracking purposes and being able to provide workflow and document management capability for the production planning and production operations as well. But just going back to the menu, I want to also show again how the reports can be used. So for example, we have a recipe library. So if I wanted to go ahead and look for a particular recipe, you can see that we have some recipes that have been created for cherry gummy edibles and some purple kush harvest, and these are immature strains. So I can go ahead and select, go ahead and select the one that was created, that was completed for the one that we were just processing. In terms of posting confirmations to the relevant process order, you can see it gives all the details. It has the attachment associated with it. It can be printed and used for future reference or used to take notes on, whatever the case might be. But the EBA report for recipes provides a very convenient way of saving and being able to reference the various recipes that have been created. Similarly, I can look at a production order report. So I can call up all of the different production oils, production orders that have been created. You can see we have some CBD oil that was done, some veg plants for sour diesel strain, and on until we get to the ones, for example, that we just processed today for the strain A clones. And then once you find the particular one, of course, you can click on the document and see what it was that was actually processed to originate this particular process order. And again, you can print the document from here as well. for whatever purpose that might be needed for. And then we also have the production confirmations. And similarly, we can look at, for example, a particular process order and get all of the details from it. So for example, here, if I wanted to just look at everything that was done for 772, I can just type in 772 in the search field in the appropriate row, and it automatically provides what's needed. And then this report can also be conveniently exported to Excel so that all of the information contained in these reports are available for external analysis as needed as well. So with the EBA application, being able to provide this type of functionality on top of a relatively complicated ERP system, it really makes it much more viable for participants in the cannabis industry to be able to implement and use an ERP solution such as ERP Cannabis because of the type of functionality that is provided by the forms that make it so much easier to be able to manage all of the data, especially with the turnover in the industry, so that having to continuously train individuals on how to process data, especially in a more complicated process such as production and manufacturing activities, being able to provide a simplified solution that doesn't require extensive training and that has been set up very intuitively is a big advantage for companies such as Panacea Life Sciences, who uses this process for all that they do with their various types of production activities that take place. So with that, Kevin, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. It's great to see how it can be actually seen, how it can be actually used in production in cannabis industry. You just showed us great examples, and I'm sure we're gonna have some also questions from our audience. That as a start, this is our Q&A session, and we put our contact information on the screen. So if you'd like to have any further conversation, if you have any questions, you can contact us anytime. So we'll keep this screen for now so that you can capture any contact information that you may need. As some of the Q&As, I also have some questions that I like to ask our panel. So one of them will be, it looks like more of an EBA related question. Does EBA have any mobile app available for users to benefit from? I think Sam can address this question. Sam, would you like to address it?
Yes, no problem. Good question. It's like you can use EBA on your mobile phone as well, or your tablet, and you can download our EBA mobile on App Store on your iOS software and or your Android device. So yes, we got the mobile application, so you can get access to EBA with your cell phone and your tablet as well.
Great, thank you very much, Sam. Joel, I have a question for you. So in terms of cost captured during the production and in the production order, how is it being handled on ERP Cannabis powered by EBA?
Well, you have costs associated with all of your materials that are being consumed within the production activity, as well as labor costs for the labor component as well. So all of that master data in terms of cost information is set up in the back end so that as you are posting, for example, 5 hours of labor for planting seed, there's an associated labor cost associated with that particular resource that is posting the information on the front end with the confirmation form. And then, of course, inventory is tracked, and the cost of inventory changes over time as you purchase additional inventory. All of that, in this case, with ERP Cannabis, is tracked in real time. So at the time that you post a particular material to a process order and consume it, the relevant cost at that point in time is captured, and all of that then is incorporated into the overall production cost for each process order within the system.
Thank you, Joe. How does the use of production forms increase efficiency for Panacea Life Sciences? I think it's a question for Nate, also for Joe, I believe.
Yeah, so the forms, help in a myriad of ways. And I guess from a very broad perspective, they help bridge the kind of different, I don't know if you even want to call them industries, but different kind of segments of our business. So we do have that manufacturing extraction side, and we do have a retail kind of sales side, and everything else in between, whether it's accounting, payroll, HR. And the forms really help provide kind of a communication between these different business segments within our company, but as well as just kind of serving as the way for a person in accounting to look at sales, or just ultimately it kind of acts as like a very collective accounting software from kind of my perspective, but it allows manufacturing to record their time and activities in a method that is kind of in their language, so to speak, in terms of their if it's manufacturing, they're focused on more production side, so the production form is tailored to kind of what they're familiar with and the inputs they are responsible for. And then if we're talking about purchasing or procurement, those forms are kind of work with them, and they all kind of work collectively to have this management software that allows everything to be within one universe, basically. So we don't have manufacturing working on a manufacturing software that they are then responsible for accurately relaying that information to sales, and then sales has their own sales software. It's really beneficial and efficient that it's all under one umbrella, so that there aren't mistakes in terms of data transfer from manufacturing to sales. And from an ease of use perspective, it's a pretty simple layout. And for a lot of people, whether it's recording the activity or putting in the purchase request, it might be something that's fairly new for them. So the EBA form allows for a pretty user-friendly and clean presentation.
Thank you, Nate. I think there is a follow-up question. What are the greatest challenges to using this process to management production activities?
Well, and I mean, it really just goes back to familiarity, right? Because, like I'd mentioned a little while ago, it really is an emerging industry. And 5 years ago, these type of margin tracking and revenue analysis and that sort of thing might not have been at the forefront of people's minds, because they were making good profit margins regardless, and there wasn't really as much need for being able to be critical about every single detail. Now that the industry has kind of become a lot more competitive, those kind of things are a lot more important. And so really, I think the biggest challenge we face is just getting people comfortable and understanding the system, because one thing that makes the system great is that it provides both that bridge that I mentioned between manufacturing and sales and that sort of thing, but also has kind of a second layer of complexity where it provides financial accounting, like I said, but also provides a managerial level of accounting, so that whether it's a manager or higher level people or production people, they can then look at each individual process order that's created. And what we use at Panacea Life Sciences is a standard costing method, just because they vary quite frequently. I mean, if you just take hemp, for instance, hemp does not necessarily have a market. It has a market price, but the market price is dictated on the concentration. So if you buy a hemp product that has 10% CBD, it's going to be more expensive than a product that has 5% CBD. And so what the system allows to do, and that's great, is to kind of update those costs of raw materials and then how they affect our finished goods in kind of a real-time type of method. And then furthermore, once the production is actually executed, a production manager or whoever it might be can then go look at that production order and say, oh, this cost us less than we typically expect it to cost. Were we just more efficient in our production, or do we need to revisit our cost of the product, or it might cost, our actual cost might have been much higher than our projected cost. So it might cause a production manager to say, well, what happened here? Did we spill something, or did something happen that we had to redo? And so it gives, not only a financial, that's, really awesome for me. I love it. But I think that also kind of leads into what we've kind of seen as our biggest challenge, just because there is a lot of functionality that's offered by the system, but for a lot of people, it is a new system for them. And the EBA forms are great because they are pretty user friendly and kind of easy to figure out, but there still does exist kind of a deficiency and a learning curve that people have to come up to, just because a lot of people who are in the manufacturing and extraction process are really just more, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. The costs that are involved with it and that sort of thing and so forth aren't really at the forefront of their mind. So just kind of getting them to understand how all of the forms, whether it's the forms or how all the data works together, because like I said, there is a disconnect sometimes for people between, oh, well, I did my job, why do I need it to be recorded? And so I think that's just the biggest hurdle. But I mean, when you're talking about a brand new industry where people were in, it's basically the industry of ours combines kind of scientific and medical kind of industry with manufacturing. So for the people who are more used to that scientific side, the manufacturing aspect and tracking our costs and tracking our production and tracking our efficiency might be new to them. And so I think, it's really just a byproduct of the industry itself that the learning curve is high in terms of, yes, you are still a scientist. Yes, you still do the extraction, but you now have a responsibility in terms of a manufacturing side.
Thank you very much, Nate. Thank you. We are coming to the end of our time, I believe, of this webinar. So before we end it, Joel, would you like to add anything before we end our webinar?
Well, thank you, Kevin. I would just like to add that certainly the EBA forms have enhanced the solution, the ERP Cannabis solution. And I would really encourage those who are attending the webinar to learn more about that and how the specific functionality that is provided by EBA in terms of document and workflow management can really enhance your process, especially when it comes to a complicated process such as manufacturing or production planning. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Well, I'd like to thank our attendees for joining this webinar. Thank you very much. And thank you to our panelists, our speakers. Nate, thank you so much for the insights. And it's been very educational. First of all, you learn a lot about the industry. And thank you again for choosing ERP Cannabis powered by EBA. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. And Joel, thank you very much for the demonstration of ERP Cannabis. And thank you for your insights as well. Much appreciated. Sam, thank you very much for joining this panel. So as I mentioned earlier, you can see our contact information on the screen. If you have any questions, if you'd like to have further conversation, please feel free to contact us anytime you like. And while we are ending this webinar, I'd like to thank you for your time and for your interest, and looking forward to seeing you in our coming webinars. Thank you, and have a nice day.